How are you doing, man?
Okay, okay. It's been a wild few days, so but all things considered, doing all right. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm sure, uh, despite every all the turbulence and everything, uh, maybe I'm in the minority here, but this is like pro sports for me. Like watching everything unfold and seeing how
Oh, okay.
you
Okay.
it's
Okay.
obviously what happened sucked, but it's like fascinating to like wow, like how did this all come about and like how is it unraveling and what's being done, like what we're expecting in terms of like more fallout from like just in the FTX side alone. Like it's clearly not finished yet, so let's see.
Yeah, that's interesting because it depends who I talk to. So, um, there's a few people who are in the camp of they're kind of already over it,
Yeah.
and I guess it never materially affected their business and what they're doing in the crypto space. But at the same time, I think you're hitting on something right. Where I asked this to Don yesterday, and I don't know, maybe you have a different take, but like I was asking, what do you, he thinks the fascination with it? Is it only for people because, like you said, it's pro sports, so it's just a minority thing? I mean, the larger media obviously picked up on it, but like I was threading a theme where like I contingent is probably not as bad as it seems. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's, like you said, there's more to come, but at the same time, it doesn't go beyond wider. It's not going to go into like the bigger economy or tradfi, and if you take the total assets of all of crypto, right, it's still by and large not that bad, right? Of
Um.
course, the people who lost their savings is bad, but
Yeah.
but beyond that, right? Like what is it? Do you think? Like what makes it so fascinating to follow?
I mean, on the in the microcosm of crypto, I think. Well, it was not bad probably for like the OG, like not your keys, not your token guys, because they're probably not messing around on these
Yeah, correct.
centralized
Exchanges.
platforms anyways. But and I think in terms of the broader mission of like crypto and DeFi, honestly, yeah, this really changes a little. Having said that, I think for like the mass, the normie market, that's probably where the impact will hit hardest. Whether that is like a drop in confidence and like I mean, because especially in the past year, we saw like huge like adoption efforts, right? You saw like this, I think it was this year, beginning of this year with Super Bowl and everything, like every crypto exchange and their mother
Oh, I
bought ads
see.
and stuff, and like
I see. Yeah.
stadiums were being named after like the companies, like they were taking ad spots on everything left and right. Mostly the exchanges, decentralized, the sexes. Um, what that means now? Yeah, there's probably like a rock in confidence. Let's see how it plays out. I'm not a fan of making like this is like the end for crypto kind of predictions or whatever, or it's going to take years
Yeah.
for it to recover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because let's be honest, a large portion of even like mainstream interest in crypto are for the outsized gains. And
Yeah.
any like
That's
just
true.
speaking frankly, like there's an entire like world of new frontier technology you can build on this stack of blockchain and decentralized applications. But at the same time, uh, it's it's largely built by speculation and trading, which
Yeah.
in my mind, whatever, it is what it is. And uh, things might seem down now, but once the next bull market runs around, and it certainly will, I think that'll change people's kind of people's drops in confidence and like their current like hesitance to jump back into the waters.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's hold that thought because I definitely want to come back and pick your mind on this this frontier layer of applications that could be possibly built, right? But before we do that, let me do the introduction really quickly. Then we can jump into kind of the main topics we kind of wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Hello, barbarians, and welcome to the 22nd episode of the LLB podcast. Today, we continue with the news coverage in the crypto space. With the recent fallout with FTX, there's a lot of new topics to talk about. And today, we have with us Justin An. If you want to get to know Justin, he did a really great EOA podcast back in 2021, more personal level, more history with us. And like promised, he's coming back to talk about crypto. Justin is currently co-founder and CEO of Quidly, Quid.li. And just to start, I thought I would never have to say this, but I am an investor in Quidly, a very baby investor. So just to put everyone's expectations, everything we say is going to be propaganda if it's good about Quidly.
No, baby investor. All contributors are valuable.
I appreciate that sentiment. I wasn't a lead or anything, but yeah, I'm along for the ride. With that qualification in mind, we will put things objectively out there. People can decide, especially if we're saying nice things about Quidly later on. But why don't you introduce what Quidly is, and then I will get to the topics.
Yeah, sure. I'm Justin, as Alex mentioned. I'm one of the co-founders of Quidly. At a high level, we like to describe ourselves as a micro on-ramp between a micro on-ramp to integrate Web 2 tools that we all know and love to use with Web 3 assets, specifically crypto. The killer use case we've built our initial traction on has largely been P2P tipping. But again, that's building these kind of features and functions into the apps we use, like Slack and Discord, for example, instead of trying to force you to use new experimental, like decentralized applications that are being built around in the blockchain crypto space. I'm sure that will be interesting fodder for our conversation today, because that was our description at the high level. How it pertains today probably will be around like how we're kind of sitting at the intersection of centralized, just for the context of FTX, I guess we'll just use SEX, like centralized exchange and decentralized exchange DEX. But yeah, we're sitting at the intersection of a centralized app and a decentralized app, which is currently a huge topic right now.
Yeah. So I think just to follow that line of thought, there's two very interesting angles, which I think we discussed before this call, which was, like you said, how do you fit into this? Because it does seem like, you're not exactly a centralized exchange. In a sense, you have a wallet function, and it's still on-ramp, off-ramp. So it is that same space, but in a different kind of way. So I think we have to probably explore that. But also at the same time, like you mentioned, you have a lot of users that had a lot of questions in the past few days. And I don't think that's something that's been covered probably well. We have a lot of crypto experts from the very top, and they must, telling us all the forecasts and stuff. But, it'd be nice to hear what the masses are concerned about for real, and then some of those things. But so which one would you want to tackle first?
Dealer's choice, man.
Dealer's choice. Let's start easy then. So let's talk about like what.
I'm not sure if dealer's choice is the best terminology used when we're talking about speculative assets and stuff.
Yeah, we it's not gambling, it's investing. But anyway, so for the users, I guess you're talking about Quidly users, right? And it's like you said, the main use case has been tipping or paying for, I guess, remote work or labor, this kind of stuff. For
micro,
then using crypto to pay for services and stuff. So that's the kind of user profile we're talking about, I'm guessing. And then what has been the main topics coming up? What are they concerned about, or like what are common themes that you have identified?
Yeah, sure. In general, I think people are. Well, let me start outside our user base first, and then work my way in. Maybe that's a better flow. Okay. You get all the way from like the OG like crypto heads to like the pundits. Like the OG crypto heads will be like, as we've always been beating our drum, like not your keys, not your crypto. And they're like, look, yet again another centralized fiasco where like
Yeah,
people's
they're not
funds
surprised.
and yeah, exactly. It's not even worth. Everyone, yeah, they predicted it. It's not even worth predicting at this point.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
some point,
It's
some yeah, greed and avarice will always like
yeah.
play factors in human led situations. Sure, fine. Um, but I think yeah, I mean, I've had now friends who have nothing to do with crypto, not even to do with tech. Just like general friends who are like, oh shit, I've seen what's happening on the news.
Yeah.
They're asking about FTX. It's just funny that a non-crypto person is asking me about
Mm.
FTX and stuff. Like, what's going on? I mean, this is anecdotal, obviously. I don't have a huge base of this kind of stuff, but yeah, they're like, "Oh, does this mean this is finally a real house of cards that's like coming down?" And so yeah, I do think one difference this time around, for example, this time around, like what was it, May or something, when Three Arrows Capital and Terra Luna and all that stuff went down. Um, that was big for the industry, but my normie friends, like, they wouldn't have even. It was just another day for them. They didn't
Yeah.
know if like billions went down the drain. Um, but this time around, I think there is a wider awareness of what's happened,
Mm.
which I think is different. Let's see how that plays out in longer term. Longer term. But I guess for our user base, our users, our community, like it's just mostly been concern about safety. I think fortunately, in the year plus we've been operating, like we've given like no reasons for them to feel unsafe, and a lot of questions saying, "Oh no, like what does this mean for you? Are we impact?" Maybe they were thinking we were using FTX to manage funds or
Mm.
something, or maybe they were
Yeah.
they were thinking we had some kind of exposure. But fortunately, we've very luckily never had any ties to FTX whatsoever at any point. I mean, the only thing ancillary is maybe because we do operate with Solana, and so
Yeah.
Solana is, for better or for worse, probably the OG Sam coin. Like it's been it took a lot of support from those guys in the early days. But other than like operating with Solana, everything else in our operations is as normal, and I'm really thankful for our community of users for continuing to trust us. I know that goes against the whole grain of like crypto philosophy and stuff. Like you're not supposed to trust; you can just verify and do it yourself. But
Yeah.
I mean, for better or for worse, we are a centralized app today, and
Yeah.
in these, as we do have in our roadmap to more and more move stuff on chain, but so long as we are in this kind of situation, it does require trust in us and the confidence that we're building with your safety in mind. And so I don't know. That's been pretty much the general gist of how we've been able to handle it so far. I think it's just been a lot of like, "Hey, is everything okay?" kind of contact
Mm.
we've been receiving, and most users can of ours can attest to you, like things have been functioning like normal, despite what's happened.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, there's quite a lot of things to unpack there, but so that means that you inherently built enough trust because were there any significant amount of people pulling their money out of wallets or um, I don't know, closing accounts? Because I mean that's
Close.
quite indicative of that behavior. That actually says more than anything what a customer says, right? What their actions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I don't want to sugarcoat it. No accounts were closed, so far as I'm
Okay.
aware of. We did see a small chunk leave, but
Okay.
to external wallets, no longer in our environment. But I mean, that is what it is. I can understand that. We'll never say, it's not in our interest to say, and we'll never say, completely trust us with your
Yeah.
fund. We're not meant to be a bank or anything. We're meant
Right.
to enable like micro incentives using crypto rails in the Web2 apps you're using today. So
Well, yeah.
if you actually if your use case for your token suddenly becomes not to reward or incentivize, and it's, oh, I need to off ramp or I need to do something else with this. We don't offer a suite of tools for you to do anything like that with. And so, yeah, it's not our mission, it's not our vision to lock user funds into Quiddly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important function if you want a more cohesive world, right? Well, I think the one interesting thing that I talked with Don yesterday was that if this was really a crypto ending event, we would see the price of the OG coins tanking, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. But they have kind of held steady. I mean, of course, from high, the historical highs, they're down.
Sure.
But like,
But
they're
they
not
were down
approaching.
anyways
And
prior
yeah,
to FTX.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but in general, there's this line of people and institutions that, like you said, this is a separate problem of them holding because they're not going to use it for like your type of off-ramp scenarios. But at the same time, it's proving the first use case of a store of value, which is the first layer of what you need, right? And if that holds the line, essentially, you can still keep value, chipping away at it. And you do need more use cases like Quiddly to kind of make it more widespread, because if there's no way to kind of bridge these worlds, then it's very hard to imagine what that looks like physically. Like
no, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think one of the things I'd like to, maybe that's not going to be so popular with the current sentiment, with the current like state of the market. But one of the things I would like to kind of emphasize, in my view, is that, I mean, it's so easy to say, to make the circumstance be DeFi versus CeFi, or DEX versus SEX, DeFi versus centralized crypto finance.
I'm kind of guilty of that with the past few conversations.
Sure, CCFi.
Yeah.
I think CCFi, I guess that would you say, because I want to specify that it's centralized crypto finance, not TradFi, which is more traditional finance.
Yeah. Correct.
I want to say that, my position is that despite sexes being this like, particularly now, this like bedeviled kind of thing, like you shouldn't trust a sex, like all they're gonna do is like mess around with your funds, and it's not your keys, not your tokens. But it's such a necessary role that these sexes play. It's just unfortunate that they're run by humans, which can cause issues when a person or a node gets corrupted. But to me, DeFi and centralized crypto finance are still one side of the same coin. It's not DeFi versus this; it's crypto versus TradFi in a way. The OGs will say, yeah, there's other ways to get crypto. You can mine it. You can look for like bounties or airdrops.
Not for the average person.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like your average person is not going to sit there like for hours scouring like the internet, the darknet to find ways to get crypto in a weird way. I mean, even for a lot of the OGs, you probably got it from like Kraken or Mt. Gox or early Coinbase, like with your bank card, with your debit card, with centralized exchanges play a critical role, for better or for worse. And I don't think the outlook right now should be DEX versus SEX. And I think that's kind of why you're seeing in reality what you said, like the top blue chip tokens are not super impacted by this. Fingers crossed, because what was corrupted here was largely altcoins, like shitcoins. It was FTT was like a big part of this, and obviously no one's trusting sexes right now. So where's this value going to go to, right? You're not going to buy other altcoins or other shitcoins. You're going to go back to like the tokens you trust. And so I think you're seeing Bitcoin play out just like Bitcoin should play out. And in my opinion, same with Ethereum. Ethereum is in my mind, a proven asset today. And despite what Bitcoin maxis may think. And it's the same. Like maybe you don't want positions in Bitcoin, so the outflow will go to Ethereum. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is indicative, like you said. It's of trust
Yeah.
in these assets compared to in a time like this.
That kind of reminds me of that silly meme. It's like where step one, create a DeFi protocol, step two, question mark, and then step three, profit, right? But like step two is probably something that looks in between these worlds. Like unless like some country fully adopts it and then every person, like all these maximalists move to this country and have an army, like it just doesn't seem, you still need, software and hardware to kind of like, trade the value and to kind of exist together for a period. And of course, the idyllic world utopia is that, after a while, if people get used to it, mass adoption, the technology catches up, yeah, then maybe it fully switches over and is pervasive. Maybe, right? But there's going to be a long period of time where you have to walk those kind of fine lines between them for them to exist together as different kind of asset classes, right? So
sure. And I mean, what you said, I think is, I don't know if it was intentional, but I think it puts a magnifying lens to what the role of finance is in general, right?
yeah.
Crypto, for better or for worse, is unregulated. And I think essentially what you've seen happens in TradFi all the time. It's just there's more regulation for consumer protection, which which kind of blocks a lot of that blowback from impacting at the consumer level, unless it's massive, like financial crisis kind of level turbulence. But crypto, and this is not a negative sentiment for me, I think that's one of the attractions of crypto is the lack of regulation today. And let's see how that will, I think regulation will be a huge question mark, a huge subject of discussion coming from this. But I mean, it's always kind of been. But I mean, again, for better or for worse, my bias aside, it's fascinating how you can build these things in crypto without regulation. And they work for certain points, whether it's through less transparent CeFi kind of ways of doing things, or whether it's through like fully automated smart contract DeFi way of doing things. They work. But then once things become an actual functioning thing, once like a DeFi protocol is pumping and people are participating, loans are being done, being paid back, gains are generated, suddenly, I mean, it's natural for it to be a vector of attack. You're creating surface area for people to suddenly realize, oh, there's value here. How can we take it? But I mean, when value is generated, that's always the case, whether it's TradFi or it's like, so like, I mean, in general, like people are like, oh, how could that happen? It's like, are you kidding me? That happens all the time. People are always trying to defraud banks. People are always trying to like game the market. And I think the only difference, which sucks for consumers, is there's less regulation on the crypto side. But I mean, again, it's a double-edged sword. We like it because of the lack of regulation, and we shouldn't be suddenly pitchfork up in arms like, oh, this is the worst thing ever when we get rugged, when the rug gets pulled.
Correct.
It's the good and the bad of a market like crypto. And I think, if anything, as we're still in this nebulous area today of regulation, if anything, I want more people to kind of understand, like, that is the risk. And like people are like, I mean, this might be a callous thing to say, and it's harder to say it when you're looking someone directly impacted directly in the face. But like, man, if you're putting your entire life savings into Shiba Inu or some like meme coin, maybe there's some other things in your life you need to examine and look into. I don't know, Alex. You tell me if that's too.
It's a tough one, because that's like in the wild west, in the modernization, industrialization, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But I guess we chose as a society to I think that there is some logic to that, to what you're saying, right? It's not wrong, but like from a humanistic level, it's not going to attract people to mass adoption, right?
Sure.
And
No,
I think
no, I disagree. I think that the gains is a big part of mass adoption. That's not the longer term story how the narrative will play
yeah.
out, but the gains are for that initial
Oh, I see what you
group.
mean.
I think that was a huge. No one will say it because yeah, people
Well, it's a
don't like talking about.
foundation.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a foundation that
Um,
won't go away. Yeah.
But just like you said, I mean, the Wild West is the exact same thing. People are like, oh, because we needed to expand. Anyways, no, people went west because of promise of gold and shit, and new land and like stuff you could own like yourself because it's so much cheaper
Well,
because you couldn't
yeah.
convince people to go out that time. Like literally, it's the gains that people are like. It's human nature.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a certain reality that you can't argue. But so, and essentially, I've always known this from the very beginning of starting to understand cryptos, that if it ever were to be widely adopted, essentially it's just a transference of fiat. And the question is, what is that mechanism of transference, right? And you could just look at historically how that happened for, modern traditional finance. Essentially, I guess what I was trying to allude to is that we care as a society, but it's also a belief into fluffy nothingness. It's just like, just because we believe, it self
Sure.
fulfills, right? And so, in a sense, we haven't crossed that
Very
threshold
sure.
yet with crypto, right? And
Sure.
so, it's harder to have a nice soft landing in that when that's not there. But that took hundreds of, I don't know, maybe finance has been around forever, actually, right? Like since humans
But I
started
mean,
having
the sentiment
civilization.
is there. It takes time. Your sentiment is correct. It takes time, and by the time
Yeah,
a crypto asset reaches that, honestly, I mean, it'll still be cool if because like building finance on crypto rails, I think opens like an entire new way of doing finance. But at the same time, when it's regulated, whether it be a CBDC or like there's
yeah,
actual frameworks around using Bitcoin or something, I do think that changes the face value of it.
yeah.
It's a totally different ball game from what's being done now, and it's more like TradFi in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's not paint you completely as a hard ass devil. I mean, you are Justin is one of the nicest people I know. So I know I feel as this it's I don't know, just like these days of blowback, you never know what happens. People might misinterpret or misquote you, right,
Sure.
or take you out of context on purpose. So
No,
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
I guess the most important thing always is like understand the risk. I like crypto. I think crypto
yeah,
it is revolutionary in a way for personal finance,
correct.
for global finance. Having said that, a lot of the benefits outside of the fact that it's digital native and it's run completely through, technology like smart contracts, is that uh, people can build economies digitally built on like the values that appeal to them, the values that are valuable to them.
What?
Um,
Yeah,
and I think that in itself is inherently amazing. But I think what people need to internalize when it comes to crypto is there's no free lunch. It's always buyer beware. Like
yeah.
and to expect it to be like a completely free meal ticket is
Okay, I understand. Yeah,
yeah, that's the sentiment I
I
want to get
see.
across. Like
Yeah, I see what you mean.
if all
You're
you got is like 5K in your bank account and you're thinking, let me put this entirely into, I mean, even Bitcoin, it's like, my friend, you're not going to be in for a good ride.
Yeah, that's just general good advice for. It's just like
Exactly.
it's just like gambling, right? If you're doing gambling, and then there's the question of accountability, and of course now then as a society you had decided some countries ban outright gambling for their locals, right? So, and I think that's the challenge. Like if this is the frontier and you have a problem with this where you think people shouldn't have lost their money, well, that's the challenge that we present to you. It's
Yeah.
open enough where you could come into the space and then try and build those things. I don't know how or what that looks like. How would you ever prevent something like that again? I don't know what that frontier technology looks like. Maybe you have some ideas, but that you know, you speculate, you gamble. I think that's what you're talking about. But at the same time, you have to separate that. Of course, we don't want people to be taken advantage of, which does happen, right? And then
Sure.
it's also very philosophically different. Like ultimately, this is very libertarian by nature because it's so early stage. It's kind of radical,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like that. And if you have more mass adoption, you probably will find the people who will try to build in those kind of safety nets to prevent this kind of happening. I guess. I don't know. Does
No,
that make sense?
absolutely. No. I mean, I think times like this always show who's the. I laugh because it's a meme. I'm not laughing to say it sarcastically.
Yeah.
It shows who's in it for the tech. Like,
Correct.
it's not. It's never pretty to build when the markets are so bearish. But at the same time,
Yeah.
most people are probably not building when the markets are bullish. They're just
Yeah.
constantly checking token prices and everything. And on that note, to tie it, I think, into what's happening right now, not to delve too deep because I obviously have no knowledge whatsoever of the situation, but I'm sure a guy like SBF as well, despite what's happening now, like I'm sure he didn't go in with the intention of how can I screw over my entire user base and lose billions of dollars? That's probably not what he set out to do. And I think, if anything, what we should, just like in terms of personal responsibility for the on-ramper side of things, the buyer side of things, who's buying crypto with fiat, we should apply the same responsibility here. I don't think this says bad things about crypto. I don't think SBF set out to, defraud people, but ultimately what this becomes is it's a specific theft of funds here. This shouldn't be indicative of the crypto industry. This is solely on SBF, whether he started out with good intentions or not. This is a problem made by him and driven by him. This is not an industry thing. I think that should be clear. Despite like my kind of warning type comments earlier, the industry is not inherently good or bad. They're bad actors, right? There are plenty of bad actors, but we should lay the responsibility on the bad actors. And so this was an example of theft from the customer and subsequently greater fraud. But it's not a crypto industry thing. It's each group that perpetrates this. We should be laying it solely on them.
That's a very nuanced thing you're saying, because you're saying you have to hold accountability, which you say that, but it's interesting, see, because you're kind of a good guy. You're giving SBF the benefit of the doubt, right? And I could see what the danger of being plugged into crypto Twitter is, because you have people who directly know him giving like the clearest of details, and like I've seen so many threads that contradict that notion, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Right? I could see how the crypto natives just get sucked in, and then then someone comes out with like, I know him, I have this experience with him, right? So, but like.
Just to be clear, I'm not giving him so much the benefit of the doubt, so much as I don't like kind of like what you're saying is on crypto Twitter, everyone's always like, I knew that guy was a villain, or I knew that guy was a bad actor. It's like, I don't know if he started out that way. I do know now that he clearly stole funds, and he was clearly misappropriating them, and he was clearly using them for things that are
those are
outside.
Facts.
But I mean, that's probably more of a. No, I don't even want to say that, but I mean, maybe he just got corrupted at some point, and it's crazy when you're not even 30 and you're managing billions, and suddenly you're in the hole for billions. That's not like suddenly like you can't pay next month's rent or something. That's like, holy shit, what have I done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a very good point. Like, objectively, outside the facts, it's anyone's best guess. Of course, some people may know more, but like that's also, you have to verify those facts, and so it's just no point to think about other things beyond the facts and the consequence, and let the courts and the people who are, I don't know who would be responsible at this point, government-wise or whatever. I don't know what's
so
going to happen there
right now, right?
Yeah, so there's no point to touch it at this point, because I think it's like beating a dead horse. Like, it's all out there already. Everyone kind of knows how it is, right? Let's go back to kind of like summarize all that, because so initially it was a question about the user. So I think one interesting thing that essentially what you said was that it's kind of weird to say, maybe not good to say, but bad PR is still good PR. What did they say? Like, all
No,
PR
no
is good
news like
PR.
bad
Yeah.
news, or all news is good news or something. Yeah, something
Right,
like that.
because essentially that, like you said, there's now more people aware of it, and maybe more people are digging into it, and that helps bring some portion of people who actually dig far enough, for the first time getting on board into crypto, right? So, and without this bad news, there's just people just know it's in the background and it's happening, and there's
Yeah,
supposed billionaires and they're buying Super Bowl things, so it sounds very realistic, right? So, but now, like
yeah,
maybe it will cause people to think more and be more educated and be more aware. So that's probably one thing.
yeah.
And
No, I
so,
mean that's a big reason why I like our approach. I mean, obviously I'm biased and I'm just shilling our shit, but like I like our approach of micro incentives that are given to one another because it's not a. I think it's different when you're when you're using it as a personal finance tool. It's like, should I put 10K into Bitcoin? Like, I have some cash. Should I put 10K into Bitcoin? I mean, that becomes like a big decision, right? Whereas,
yeah,
like, if it's literally in the context of people working together, and it's like, I mean, you would get your colleague or you would get someone who's working with you a beer or a lunch or something, right? Lunch is on me, and it's all right. Here's $20 in Bitcoin to go wild with it. It's yours.
yeah,
And I think the context in which you become exposed to crypto also is a big driver in terms of how you approach it. The fact that for us, the context of using crypto as a more appreciation recognition tool in a micro payment kind of way, in a micro reward kind of way, it's psychologically different. And I think it's the approach we prefer as builders. I mean, that's kind of like, even though we're built like a SEX, like a centralized exchange, our function, our core function is different. And
yeah,
I would like to think that's how we're building and designing what we do. It's more around the idea of sharing values as opposed to like hoarding values and things like that. And
yeah.
so like anyone on Quidly, I think in my mind shouldn't be amassing without going into specific accounts or anything. There shouldn't be one person with suddenly like $1 million on Quidly or something like that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
should be always with the intent, and that's how we're building the product, and that's how we're designing it. It's like, okay, generosity, appreciation more than generosity is a virtue in itself. And I think although you can't force organizations to adopt certain cultures the way you want them to, I do
yeah,
think when we work together, especially when we're working online, where a lot of that context gets stripped away, there needs to be mechanisms in place to encourage recognition and incentivization. And so
yeah.
that's where I think a better form of adoption can come from.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, because that's very important. Like, you approached it from trying to solve a tangible problem, right? It's an efficiency play with the technology angle, right? The crypto, the blockchain technology and cryptocurrency allows you to pay whoever you want in a more efficient manner. And of course, there might be some questions of conflict with traditional finance allowing this or not, because and where does that fall under, right? But at the end of the day, I think if you ask all of your power users, I think it's not like you built it with the intent of speculation or any of this kind of thing. So that's a big difference philosophically, and you're trying to bridge those worlds, right, and create that value, and it's seen in the actual use cases. So for, I don't know, maybe you could help explain a very tangible use case so people understand that something can be built in this space that kind of straddles both worlds, but with the intent of helping people and actually add value to society.
Sure. Tell me if you think this response is actually addressing what you said. Maybe a lot of people will take issue with this, but I think honestly there are very few decentralized applications today that can claim that they're really adding value or solving a real need. Off the top of my head, like wallets, like let's talk about light wallets, your own managing your own wallet through something like MetaMask. It's
Yeah.
obviously extremely necessary uh, for doing things in the Ethereum ecosystem, but at the same time, I mean, it's really just useful if you want to do stuff in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's not really
Yeah.
solving like it's super powerful in the Ethereum ecosystem, but like still, your average person is not going to go out of their way. Like if you're not interested in Ethereum and crypto, like what are you going to do with MetaMask? Um, I,
Speculate. That's it.
or any wallet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, MetaMask will say they're a gateway into any decentralized app. But again, if you have no interest whatsoever in this stuff, it's like,
Correct.
okay, what are you going to do? I would say a better, um, probably the best product market fit to borrow like traditional kind of startup terminology and stuff. The best case of product market fit in crypto I see today is like a DEX, like Uniswap. If you're in crypto and you want to swap around with tokens and not get dinged or like controlled by centralized exchanges, a DEX like Uniswap is revolutionary. It really gives you
Yeah.
freedom to like grab the tokens you want without any intermediary telling you like, no, you can't grab this, or like, and that protocol is amazing. You can shut down the web front end, but someone else can just
Yeah.
fork the code and spin up their own. And we've seen that time and time again. Not that Uniswap has been shut down, but I mean, so many exchanges have forked Uniswap today, and
Yeah.
I think that's an example of where like real utility is. Other than that, though, there's very little. And then in the ancillary DeFi kind of protocols where you need liquidity for certain pools and stuff, obviously you see users there because that's what's powering a lot of the swaps and things like that. But outside of this, there's not that much real fit at the moment, and
Correct.
I think this is where like a centralized approach still adds a lot of value. You can argue the technical merit of things for days until the cows come home. I think that's the expression. But
Yeah.
uh, if like honestly, in my mind, it's the same. Let's be generous and say it's like 20,000, 30,000 like users, which is a lot, but still not a lot in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's the same 20,000, 30,000 degens that are like, farming airdrops, funding liquidity pools, like testing
Yeah.
out things, and just we're still very far from mass adoption. And I think that's to kind of tie it back, like that's why it shouldn't be DEX versus SEX, decentralized versus centralized crypto applications. It's crypto versus TradFi still
Yeah. Correct.
in a very real way. And
Simplistic way.
TradFi still has tremendous advantage in terms of the average user and like what they do on it. I think we see time and time again, there's a ton of promise and a lot of benefits to doing things on crypto rails, but for better or for worse, the focus has not really been on user experience. And it's hard when you're trying to pioneer a technology that's still new and doesn't have a lot of user references to
Correct.
pick up on.
It's contrarian.
Exactly. And so we'll get there. I think each time we get closer and closer, but yeah, if I'm frank, there's still a gap in terms of like expectations versus reality.
Yeah, and I think for a long time, which is why the worlds need to coexist if there's going to be any transference of any meaningful fiat, is because the technology, the efficiency, the energy problems are not getting solved anytime soon, where TradFi has way more efficiency in that respect with, how the internet was built and where it sits on and how it's run. Even still, probably to a large degree, a lot of, modern finance hasn't even fully gone onto the internet still. They're still running on,
but
right?
I
So
think
like,
that's where crypto has a huge piece to play. It's just the, yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, I think it took hundreds of years to convince people to get
yeah,
into like a TradFi setup. Like even
correct.
convincing people to use a bank is like you still hear
Yeah,
stories in some
people
countries
still
where
don't.
people, yeah, it's like I'd rather have my money under my mattress. It's like why would
But
I
no,
give
but
it to this?
but those countries are now adopting crypto instead, right? Where it doesn't make
Yeah,
sense to use the modern, right? So,
yeah.
so,
yeah.
so that's it's
They're
very
just
interesting.
digitizing their hoarding behavior. It's like they've just
Correct. Yeah.
leapfrogged they've
Yeah.
leapfrogged digital bank, and it's like, look, this is my digital bed, and I'm gonna put all my
Correct.
digital money under. Yeah, no,
Which,
absolutely.
if you think about how like WeChat came about or how modern e-commerce in China is, it's of a very different flavor because they had to skip generations, or the problems they solved in those contexts were very different. Where like U.S. and maybe Europe is very stratified in many respects in those verticals. So you have different solutions there, but China just puts it all under one platform. WeChat's everything, and then if you go to if you want to use search, they don't use Baidu or the Google of China. They use I don't know what is it, like they use their version of TikTok, or they use like the biggest e-commerce Taobao or whatever as search instead, and all the information sits there, right? So it's very weird. Like
Do you
so,
search on a e-commerce website?
yeah. Well, I don't know if it's e-commerce. It's one of those like bigger platforms that's not the search engine. So it might be a social media. Like I'm not the best Chinese
Wait, so like
person
for
who knows
example, if
China
you
very
want to
well.
learn about Bitcoin, would you type that into Taobao and Taobao will tell you about Bitcoin?
Maybe it's not maybe it's like a TikTok or something, or like a social media platform instead, right?
You'll
But
just go
like,
directly to
yeah,
an influencer or
well, because
someone who explains it to you.
well,
Okay.
because you're thinking maybe e-commerce in the sense of a Westerner. It's just you go there to shop shit, but it's a universal platform in many senses over there. And I'm probably butchering a lot of this, so someone can help clarify that for me. But essentially, right? So like, it's interesting, like you're saying, though,
Hilarious.
if there's these countries that are adopting it as their first layer, you get a whole different world that grows from that foundation, right? So,
For sure.
like, it just speaks to the promise of crypto, right?
I mean, the way it is today, if they're adopting Bitcoin, it's stateless, and I can see why, from a state's perspective, that sucks. But
Yeah, yeah.
from a consumer perspective, it's awesome. Like
It's probably
I
more
think that's
stability, right?
in line with again, not to shill what we're doing or not to say what we're doing is like the right way or whatever, but like I mean, the killer use case in crypto still after a decade is literally borderless P2P transfer of value. Like
It's
the fact
amazing.
that you don't have to, like, you just have to pick up a wallet, give me your wallet public address, and I'll send you Bitcoin, I'll send you ETH, and no one can stop me as long as I have my own
Yeah,
wallet, as long as I have my own tokens. Like
this is that the case for Quidly? Like, is it because I've done it. I've just sent money around the world from Quidly wallet to Quidly wallet for my ask my friends to set up to get them introduced to crypto, right? Is there any way that could be blocked? Because that would be sad.
Eh, yeah, no, because we're not a wallet today. We classify ourselves more as an account because we are centralized
Account.
on the
Okay.
front end.
Yeah.
We're using blockchain on the back end to manage all that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not like an FTX level where like we're gonna invite super scrutiny today yet, but how we're managing on the back end is we're the proxy for you, but you as like the user, it's just your account like a sex. That's what I'm saying. That's why I compare it to
Yeah.
like a Coinbase, or obviously I don't want to say FTX right now, but like but that's why I would compare it to like a Coinbase, where it's like yeah, you're, for better or for worse, trusting us to manage your tokens
Yeah.
to send through the applications you want to send to. That's why I'm saying like users of Quidly shouldn't be holding like 1 million just to hold 1 million. Like if you're
Yeah.
suddenly sitting on top of 1 million on like $1 million in fiat on Quidly value, either you're super generous with like your organization people, or like you probably should be taking custody of that, because
Yeah.
I still align with the ultimate facets of crypto, like not your keys, not your tokens. It's Quidly is not meant to be a wallet today. As we
I
move
see.
more and more on chain, will enable more and more self-custodial, non-custodial ways to
Oh, perfect.
access
Okay.
the protocol. Yeah, but I mean, to build our initial traction, look, I mean, we built a DApp before moving into this direction, and it totally sucked. Like, if you don't get users, the big technical debt of what you're building is just all for nothing. And I mean,
Yeah.
that is what it is with blockchain, building on blockchain, building with smart contracts. And it's not like building a normal Postgres database app where you can
Yeah.
keep like once the smart contract's out there, smart contract's out there,
Yeah.
and it's just not a good how would you call it? Like you're not building step by step. You're kind of building. Yeah, building with blockchain is like that. You've already got the blueprints in mind, and you can't derail from that, really.
Yeah.
Whereas like normal building, you can build as modularly as
Yeah.
possible, and I mean that's still one of the benefits of like let's not
Yeah.
throw the even though we see a crypto future, a future of finance built on crypto rails, let's not throw the baby out with the water, right? Like Web
And
two ways of building is
correct.
efficient.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, you will need to have better and better interfaces as the technology scales and gets better, right? You know, you have your back end, but your front end needs to keep up too, right? And I think that's a huge component that people always tell me that's missing. So it's
I,
important to kind of put that all together.
I mean, with all dApps today, you're still relying on Web two front ends, right? Like
Correct.
you
Yeah.
can and use unless you're interacting directly with the smart contract, which makes it even worse for your normal user because like your
Yeah.
average mainstream person, your normie, to like like it would just be like shoving a bunch of code in front of somebody. It's like, look, how can
Correct.
look, find the functions you need and make it happen
You wanted
directly.
responsibility. Here's your responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what web front ends provide. But as so long as dApps are relying on web front ends, like that is a reliance on Web two. People will say, yeah, yeah, but you can fork it and then spin up your own. Okay, I get it, but like that's still not the most convenient way for a average user to interact with an
Yeah.
application. You know?
So I think you were kind of, I thought you were maybe backing yourself into a corner, but I think you might have answered one of my questions where, because you keep talking about how the most biggest use cases are kind of like what you're doing, where, you know, if I load some money onto Quidly, I could use crypto to pay people, you know, for whatever I want, you know, tipping or incentives, right? But the other use case you were talking about were a lot of DeFi stuff or maybe DeFi finance stuff, right? So it seems though, then how do you reconcile where you are today, which is kind of where a centralized exchange kind of is, or where wallets are, and then it seems that you're saying the promise and the future is more in the decentralized way. So how do you reconcile that as a, you know, for the vision of Quidly and where that moves towards? Or do like, does that eventually morph into where Quidly is purely going to be a DeFi player, or is for forever you're straddling because that doesn't go away? Right? It seems like you're almost backed yourself in a corner, or and then you're saying the best promise is somewhere else, but you are not there where you build stuff, right? So
I wouldn't be surprised if I ever back myself into a corner. It's pretty par for the course.
I mean, unless that is the vision, right? So
No, I mean, long term, we do want to build a protocol around incentivization, better habits for automating
I
incentivization
see.
and
Okay.
compensation. And for us, like, the future of work is decentralized, not even in the crypto sense. People are more and more doing things piecemeal. They're more and more like taking
I'm trying
on
to.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's I mean, I think digital nomads get it in that sense. And
Yeah.
decentralization outside of the I mean, crypto, it's such a meaningless word now in crypto, but they've just
Yeah.
really appropriated that word outside of like its core meaning is like
Yeah.
work online, like digital life, not just work, digital life is completely decentralized, right? You can be in one place and still be interacting and living with other people in another
Yeah.
place. And for us,
Mm.
that change in lifestyle, that change in habit will also reflect in the way we work and participate in the public sphere and expect to make contributions and receive contributions in the public sphere. And that can ultimately be done better on chain, like a compensation stack built specifically for the kind of future of work we see. And ultimately, in terms of how Quiddly functions, we do want that to be an on-chain protocol.
Yeah.
How Quiddly, the company today, plays into that is we're doing the initial research with the way people are using the tool today, what user behavior is, how people are like our theories on how micro incentives and micro rewards work are always going to be different from how they're actually implemented in practice, right? And it's
Yeah.
hard to build that all on chain in the beginning. So Quiddly, the company, is kind of the initial phase to then building Quiddly, the protocol. And when Quiddly, the protocol is in place, the role of Quiddly, the company, changes to be like one commercial, the major, ideally commercial arm building on top of that open protocol to provide the web face, kind of like what we
Yeah.
described before, for how most people would want to use Quiddly today. But
Yeah.
once it becomes an open protocol, anyone can fork it and anyone can build their own workflows built on the initial protocol that
Yeah.
we launch. But that's how we see Quiddly, the company, interacting today and
I see.
ultimately more
In the future.
long-term vision. Yeah.
Sorry, just a short answer if you could. In that scenario in the future where it's more towards decentralized and you have the infrastructure, how does Quiddly monetize from that?
When there's already a protocol in place, I mean, perhaps there'll be a token.
Okay.
Let's see. But outside of that, I mean, Quiddly, the commercial entity, will still be building things, and maybe we'll still have traditional soft model kind of things where it's like, oh, to
Yeah.
access certain set of features, you pay XYZ. And yeah, longer term, I mean, it would still be like, what's an example of that today? It would be like any consultant on top of like Linux OS or I mean,
Mm.
even less open source kind of things like my,
Yeah.
Microsoft Windows still has
Yeah.
tons of consultants who can come into an
That's
organization
true.
and show you how to. And so, like that would be what our commercial arm
I see.
ultimately is envisioned as. Like, okay, how
I
can
see.
you
I
best
see.
utilize this protocol? Or here's already a front end built for
Mm.
this protocol that can help you do
I
X,
see. I
Y,
see.
Z. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. All right. Cool. So I think we should probably end with two topics. Let's talk about the pièce de résistance, right? The main let's talk about manufacturing trust and how can we trust you, bro? What is the essence of this? And we think about trust in general and like how humans just basically trust each other, and then how we've replicated that as a layer in current modern society or finance or whatever have you will. Essentially it's the same thing, right? And I think the whole thing that people should understand about blockchain technology is that real use case will come from trust being solved. If there's no trust problems, then probably blockchain won't matter much for it, right? Ultimately. And
Yeah.
so how in this current state, and if you tell me your thoughts about trust in general, how trust is built in general in this current day, and how does that relate maybe to Quiddly and why we should trust you?
Wow, what a tough question. um, just trust me, bro. No, I mean,
Here's the money.
yeah. I mean, for lack of a better, I don't think I'm going to be able to give a satisfactory response to that today. I think, fortunately, we're in a place where we have a decent sized user base where they've not experienced any problems, or if they have, we've been able to resolve it for them. Um, and so it's just I mean, just like any startup, like pure startup, literally like a startup, not a tech company. You build that trust over time with the users who really like what you're doing and who really use what you're doing in their day-to-day lives and operations.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate enough to have a degree of that, and we hope to continue offering that. I think in the sense of crypto, and when it comes to like, managing tokens and, in the ledger sense, um, when you're pure on chain, it's easy, right?
Yeah,
Share the smart
correct.
contract, share the wallet addresses, and
Everything's open.
you should be able to see it ASAP on any Explorer. What the implosion of FTX has spurred a lot of exchanges to do now is like a direct audit.
Oh, yeah, Don mentioned this. It's the third party audit. I forget what they called it. Oh, you can't hear me? I
Audit.
lost my train
We're
of
talking
thought.
about audit.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. You were talking about third party audits. I forget the exact term, but there was a specific term
They're
that people
using a
want to use
specific
now.
term right now. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
The jargon's always
yeah,
changing, but
yeah,
yeah, a lot of sexes are saying like, okay, yeah, we'll take a voluntary audit, but even that, I mean, that sounds like a reasonable thing to say, but even that is already being proved like weird because it's like suddenly, oh shit, there's like uh, 500 million of funds suddenly
yeah,
entering like when you said you
yeah.
do the audit. Where was that shit before? And like, I think I don't have any direct answers at the moment, but I think this will cause a lot of soul searching internally in the industry as well as scrutiny from outside of the industry. There probably will be some on-chain tools built by
Yeah,
audit companies to, offer a more viable
yeah,
transparency solution. I wouldn't be surprised if they're already like kind of like escrow or account monitoring solutions that will quickly be put in place to be like, here's real time, like, I
yeah,
mean, a lot of stable coins are like this, right? They're like, we will release weekly or monthly or semi-annually annual audits to
yeah,
show that. I think Circle is like that, where it's like Deloitte or one of the big four is like regularly showing, yep, there's a billion stable coins. If there's a billion USDC, there's $1 billion in the bank to show that
yeah,
we're
yeah,
collateralized properly. This might be some of the stuff that comes into place, which for consumer safety,
yeah,
obviously, is a great thing. On the flip side, that'll clearly make things harder for startups. I mean, the more requirements in terms of regulation and compliance that are put in place, the harder it becomes to enter the space without totally taking on like a degen or DeFi mindset, And
yeah.
I guess I can't. That's why I keep saying for better or for worse, because it will suck, but at the same time, like I guess to quote Jurassic Park, life will somehow find a way. People will always find ways to do things.
Well, what you're saying, and I think people need to understand this. I mean, it's very easy for a blockchain maximalist just to say, well, the answer is easy. Just trust the math. You're responsible, and then build the system where you automate it. But that's like a 1 or 0. But
Yeah,
we live in a world of nuance, and we live in a world of grays, and that's not going to necessarily, like, even if you could build as much of that technology and manifest it today, there's going to be something somewhere where it's not going to fit perfectly and not make sense, right?
sure.
And so like I think your example of how traditionally how these Web 2 companies came about, and we trust them until we started not trusting them. Like when Facebook got too big, it destroyed democracy, or when all the
Yeah,
data leaks, and these were the inherent problems of Web 2, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, what you described, that process in the early stages, is no different if you think about humans on a one-to-one relationship. And I've had to go through some really hard lessons in life between people, and even we went through different times in our relationship. There's it'll be interesting to know that we're good friends now. I've invested in your company. But before, like, no, we talked about it in EOA, we used to just yell at each other and fight a lot. And what people need to understand, trust is something that's a moving target. It's not something that's fixed, right? And it's something that could be built up and broken down and built up again,
Eh,
right? And so, right.
I
So
think
if you
it's a
think
funny
about that,
example. Just
yeah,
to add a little bit of my own color there, it's weird because it's layers, I guess. Then because
yeah,
in
it
our
is.
relationship situation, I would say it was a two kind of on my side why there was friction in an argument is I don't think there was always trust that you had
Okay.
the best
Yeah.
interest in mind, because
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Correct.
it wasn't
We're not bad
so
people.
terrible where it was like, I don't think he's trying to fuck shit up. It was more, it was like a trust where it was another layer of the initial layer of trust was there. It was more a layer on top of that where it's like, from my perspective, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
it was good or
Don't
bad.
worry. It's
Like from
fine.
my perspective, it was like, can I trust him to do this particular thing? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't where like I'm gonna walk away because I don't trust him to have the organization's best interest in mind. Because I
Yeah.
think my commentary there is I did trust you to have the
Correct.
organization's interest in mind. It was more like, can I trust him with this particular thing that we were doing? But you're right. Like it's like there's that human element where the like it that kind of oscillates, right?
Yeah. And there's so like it's having some model of this kind of trust and what I've realized is, when people have frictions and trust breaks down, people will say, why didn't you come to me? Well, it's because we had trust, but the paradigm changes, right? So like, if you want to think about in the sense, like, how can we trust you, bro? It's an everyday exercise where you have to live up to people. You have to manifest your values. That's why content
Sure.
like this actually is important. You got to put a face to it. Worst case, someone can call me and I tell them where you are, right? That's going to be, put a lot of trust into it. Someone's going to come after you, right? So like ultimately
Don't
we
tell them my
hold each
address.
other accountable. Yeah. And of course, and even in these models with fraud and con artists or grifters, it's still something that can't be solved fully, which is why the
No, yeah.
maximalists of blockchain like that solution. It's almost like creating a perfect world, but ultimately it's like philosophical where I don't necessarily think that's going to always be the case. And so if we're to look at the space of centralized exchanges, or in the case of Quidly, we would have to look at these different avenues, and then you have to show up every day and prove it, right? And you have to, this is why reputation more often than not, especially in the business community, as you grow older and older, is more important, because one wrong thing, one misstep, you just lose all that trust, right? And
Sure.
so the question is, how can we trust you? Is by doing all those things that we know about already, about how we trust our friends, how we trust our family, how we trust
Yeah.
this, right? And so Quidly has to show up and do that every day. And, the company core values have to reflect that. It has to be communicated well, which is then what you talked about, the startup execution part, which is what people have done over time. And even still, when you're a big at scale kind of thing, where the stakes are even higher, and you have to find ways to even manufacture even further systematically, culturally, on a surface level, right? So it's like you said, it's not going to be a perfect answer, but essentially that's how we've operated since the beginning of existence, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say something like some pretty thing like, yeah, we're going through like we got like SOC 2 like compliance, blah
Yeah,
blah
yeah,
blah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, for the user that means nothing. And I think the best we can do outside of like, what do you call it, like outside of decorations, ornamentation like that is, yeah,
correct.
like you said, kind of come in, day out
Yeah,
to deal with this
yeah,
um, the mess that is
yeah.
life.
I mean, ultimately, there's also leaps of faith that we do every day too. Like,
Sure.
we trust that someone submitted their financials to the SEC, the SEC didn't fudge with it, and right. So there's like ultimately there's always these
Yeah.
leaps of faith.
The first time I ever bought Bitcoin, it was like through like just a PayPal invoice. It was like,
That's a huge leap of faith, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, of course, technology hopefully can solve that over time. Like, it helps solve part of it, but still, even with your, the best protocols in place, I'm sure you could find a way to cheat someone. Like, so.
Oh, I mean, hackers are gonna hack. Like, let's
Yeah,
not make DeFi is great, and smart contracts can create good infrastructure, but let's not pretend they're unhackable. Like that's why you see hacks all the time, and like that's
correct.
the problem with the smart contract. You build it, you think it's done. Once you give the surface area for attack,
Yeah,
people are like, that's human nature. Like
yeah,
people are. I mean, living in France, I think a little bit of a tangent, but it. I never noticed this in any other country I've lived in so clearly as I've noticed it here is I mean, think about bureaucracy and how like governments and institutions have processes in place for you to do stuff, and I mean those are protocols. in a way. Like those are protocols in the smart contract of life.
Yeah,
And
correct.
French people are, there's so much bureaucracy here that's in your face. I guess, for example, in the case of the US, there's a ton of bureaucracy, but you just don't see it because you don't really
Yeah,
deal with it
correct.
on a.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
here,
yeah.
you're literally dealing with it on a regular basis, and as a result of that, you constantly have people hacking. There's a knowledge of how to
Yeah,
hack the
yeah.
bureaucracy, and oh, you need money from that, so you could. There, like the knowledge
Mm,
that people have amassed from participating in this bureaucracy. Oh, you're taking spin class lessons or something, some kind of exercise. Actually,
yeah.
did you know that under law XYZ, there's actually like
Wow.
there's actually an exercise grant that you can receive, and then that'll pay for like 90% of your
Wow.
like you just don't realize how you come to realize, I think, that just you're in any framework you find yourself living in, you're constantly going to be hacking, and I think
Correct.
that's a metaphor for anything that people think hacking is just using a computer to steal from a bank or something, but no, it's just finding penetration points, finding loopholes and attack vectors to exploit something, and smart contracts are no different.
Yeah, and ultimately that means a future where even if we are perfectly decentralized and everyone only uses wallet to wallet transactions, you still will have problems. You still will have trust problems, right? So it's
Exactly.
and in that sense, this is why you this and like I don't know if we did a good job. Maybe we'll just get a lot of shit for this after this episode, but like I hopefully that lands somewhere to clearly say that there is some type of case or some logic where that even though centralized exchanges were kind of rampant with problems and ICOs where they still have a place in the future, and it's just a matter of time where we could keep layering like the layers of trust, keep layering them in, and that'll be a moving target. But hopefully we get to a stage where it's we can land more softly and people trust each other more, something like that, I guess. I don't know.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
We'll never be free from hacking, but
yeah.
like
Correct.
still, like I mean, banks get it defrauded all the time, or attempts to defraud banks happen all the time. So it's just a matter
Yeah,
of what's uh, what's the best way to manage all
yeah.
that.
So I guess maybe close off. I think we kind of done an implicit job of trying to champion the cause of where you're sitting and what Quidley's doing. But I don't know, maybe you can give us a quick, concise summary, elevator pitch of why we should use Quidley. And then maybe
Yeah,
I don't know if you're open to it, we could talk about your thoughts on how this progresses going forward for Quidley, and maybe your thoughts of fundraising, this kind of stuff.
yeah. Always happy to shill what we're building.
Yeah.
I think I think from an organization perspective, there's always you always need people motivated, engaged, and incentives are a big part of that. Whether I mean, incentives are a big part of life, right? It's why we're
Yeah.
motivated to do things, and why we do the things we do. And in that calculus of life, like you have to always understand, not understand, but you need to weigh incentives to understand the choices you want to make in your day to day. What's the most benefit to you, or what's the most advantage? What's the thing you can do that advantage is the most advantageous to you? And I don't think that's any different in an organization. I think anyone that's worked in a big organization will understand that incentives play a big part in like how you participate, how you contribute, how much you're engaged, and that doesn't change when organizations shift to online, to digital life,
Yeah.
whether it's fully remote or whether it's a hybrid thing, or whether even when you're in the same place today, we're more and more using tech to communicate and to collaborate. And I think recognition and appreciation play a big part in keeping motivation and engagement high. And using, rather than sharing like a $20 Applebee's gift card that no one's going to use, probably you hold on to like the day before expiration. Like, oh, I guess I should go to Applebee's.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not share access to Web3, the future of the web? I'm sure a lot of skeptics will be like rolling their eyes, like Web3, but like, yeah, I mean, To me, $20, $50 in ETH is gonna go a longer way than like $20, $50 at some restaurant you don't have any interest in, or like an Amazon
Yeah.
gift card. Like, and yeah, for digital natives, for people who are collaborating online more and more, um, let's build those appreciation recognition rails using tokens, which again, as I think was implicit in what I'm saying, rewards for loyalty used to be just internal and only available in the context of your organization. But as we were talking about the decentralization of work, that's less and less the case, and people are more migrant. People stay less at one organization or managing multiple projects. Um, let's make incentives more suited for the way people are living their digital lives today, and that's where Quiddly comes in.
And it
That was
sounds like
long and winded.
yeah, it sounds like it's the infrastructure that will power the currency of future work essentially. And that future work will just keep being dynamic and changing. And, essentially you're sitting at the intersect of that. And it just allows for more access and more freedom ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I would say at the
Yeah.
intersection of future of work and crypto finance.
Yeah. And so then, for the last question, then how do you thinking about continuing funding? Do you feel that it's always good to take up more money along the way, especially now that the macro environment has changed, or are you waiting to accumulate value then raise bigger rounds later?
That's a good question. Obviously, it's always, I think, from a corporate finance perspective, um, better to raise the bigger rounds, or better to raise rounds like in a more
Yeah,
in
substantial
like the
way.
beautiful seed, Series A, Series B
Ah, I
kind of
see.
way
Yeah,
of things. It's interesting. The market is like you're always getting weird sentiments from the VC industry. On one hand, there's never been this much private capital amassed by like funds to do like investments and stuff. But then everyone's like, oh no, the market conditions are terrible, startups are dying, and VCs are not deploying capital. And
yeah,
so I think as we see more and more founders who are going through like VC cycles, just as an asterisk, you don't have to raise venture capital to be a founder, right? Like
correct.
you can build businesses the way you want. I
Yeah,
always want to make that explicit because people are like, I need to raise capital, but
yeah, correct.
you know, do you really need to? But if you are if you are a venture-backed founder, I think just because there's more and more of us now, like it's become a more common thing than before. You see more and more people recommend without hesitation. If there's capital on the table, take it because you never
Yeah,
know what's
yeah,
what the market looks like. You never know, and so no, I mean Quiddly did our seed at the end of last year, beginning of this year,
hmm,
and runway wise, we're fine, but we are looking at we are looking more from the macro side of things, less about our business and more on the
yeah,
landscape. And yeah, we are thinking about what the best next steps are in that direction. To talk frankly, like I don't want to
yeah,
paint like a beautiful startup picture where some founder gets like no insight
yeah,
whatsoever. Yeah, honestly, we're looking at the macro and thinking like we're doing a few million now in volume, and we're thinking like we can position. Our initial thought was we can position ourselves for a Series A in like Q2 of next year.
yeah,
Um, with the way markets are looking right now, um, do we want to just in case
yeah.
uh, pad our runway a little bit more to ride
Be
things out
safe. Yeah.
if things don't look good? Yeah, it's something on our minds, and
Okay.
let's see. I think a lot of VCs many VCs are obviously gleefully who are skeptics anyways in crypto are like
Yeah. There.
like this is their time to be like I told you this is like a
Yeah.
Ponzi
Correct.
and a house of cards. But
Yeah. Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
same time, I think a lot of VCs have also converted, have kind of moved into like, oh,
Mm.
like crypto makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot that resonates with me here. So Let's see what happens. We've
Yeah.
continued to have conversations with our investors and external investors for the entirety of this year, and communication-wise, no one's explicitly said they're pulling back. But
Yeah.
having said that, we do know a lot of crypto funds are now underwater at the moment because of like, for whatever reason, they decided
Yeah,
to
correct.
use FTX to custody their own funds and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's a totally different conversation.
No, it's to me it's clear. I mean, like ultimately, I think you're right, and I mean, that's just traditional wise advice. And I think any long term veteran VC probably would say something like that. And I don't know, at least for my very limited experience in angel investing and looking at this, is that especially like if you're doing angel, you have to be very contrarian because you're ultimately on the frontier and you're at the place with the highest risk. If everyone's running from the doors, especially if this is a shakeout, if you're in it for the long haul and you know the fundamentals, you should be looking for that tiny power law percentage that's going to give you returns for the next decade. So you want to be looking at this. And if I had more liquidity, I'm a small poor person, so I would give you more money. But I think this is where you want to be digging in. And then if you find it credible, they should definitely reach out to you. Whether it's for a short-term round, just a pad runway, or whether for it's, in the future, whenever you hit more milestones and go for the Series A, right? So
Oh, wow.
I
Appreciate
think,
that, Alex.
yeah, I think it's good advice and I think it makes sense. So, then at this point, I guess I'll flash up your deets, you can send to me later and then we'll pop it up. Then people can reach out to you. Is there anything else you want to plug before we go?
No, what do I want to plug? Linux master race. Don't use master. Obviously, plug Quidly. Reach out if you're interested in Quidly, but maybe we're not operating with the token you prefer. Where we this year alone we've added over 10 tokens to our. We prefer working directly with the token organization. So the 10 tokens we've added were with explicit cooperation with the organizations who manage those tokens. Reach out whenever. Otherwise, please use Quidly. Please listen to Low Level Barbarians and for listening to me.
And definitely, I think that's a really good point and we need more bright minds in this space. I think I'm open to jam. Justin's open to jam. Let's get more people talking about more solutions to adding real tangible value in this space so that, it can be more widely adopted and widespread and, the promise of the actual good of the technology does become true. So yeah, great. Thanks for coming on, Justin. Appreciate your time.
Likewise, man. Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.